The crack of a man's hand against a child's face cut through the rumble of 30 motorcycles idling at a gas station on the corner of Martin Luther King Boulevard and 5th Street. It was 9:47 p.m., 38 degrees, and a 7-year-old boy named Malik had just been knocked to the ground. "Stop!" His voice was tiny, almost swallowed by the thunder of engines, but someone heard it. Malik lay on the grimy asphalt, barefoot, his socks nothing but tatters around his ankles. The cold bit into his skin like teeth. In his small fist, he clutched a canvas bag, the only thing he owned in this world. Inside was half a sandwich and a teddy bear. The teddy wasn't for him. It was for his little sister back at the house. He'd been trying to bring it to her. Now his cheek burned. His mouth tasted like pennies. Blood. The man standing over him was named Dice Morgan, shaved head, eyes like 2 chunks of dirty ice. He wore a filthy black leather jacket that smelled like cigarettes and something sour. Dice wasn't a stranger. That was the worst part. He was Malik's aunt's boyfriend, the man who lived in their house, the man who hurt them when nobody was looking. "I told you," Dice growled, his voice low and mean. "You don't leave that house without permission. You hear me?" Malik didn't answer. He couldn't. His jaw throbbed where the slap had landed. He pressed his palm against it and felt the heat already rising under his skin. Tomorrow there would be a bruise, another one to hide, another lie to tell at school. The air smelled like gasoline and stale snacks from the station's shelves. Overhead, a neon open sign buzzed and flickered, casting red and blue shadows across the lot. The sound mixed with the rumble of motorcycles. So many motorcycles. Malik had noticed them when he'd first run past. A sea of chrome and leather. Men in vests filling up their tanks, drinking coffee from foam cups. They looked scary. Tattoos crawled up their arms. Skulls decorated their jackets. Chains hung from their belts. Malik had been too scared to ask them for help. He'd just run past, hoping to disappear into the night. He hadn't made it. Dice had caught him right here, in the yellow glow of the gas station lights. And now there was nowhere to run. "Get up," Dice said. His voice carried that edge Malik knew too well. The edge that meant more pain was coming. "Get up, boy. We're going home. And when we get there, you're going to learn what happens when you disobey." Malik's legs wouldn't work. Fear had turned them to water. He clutched the teddy bear tighter inside his bag, thinking of his sister's face. Her name was Keisha. She was 4. She cried every night now, and Malik couldn't protect her. He couldn't even protect himself. "I said get up!" Dice's hand rose again. Malik curled into a ball. He squeezed his eyes shut and waited for the hit. His small body trembled on the cold pavement. No mother to save him. She died 2 years ago in a hit and run. No father to call. He'd never met the man. No system to trust. They'd already failed him once. All Malik had was this: a cracked parking lot, a monster shadow, and the certainty that no one in the world would stop what was about to happen. But here's the thing about that night. Malik was wrong. 15 yards away, a man named Rebel set down his coffee cup. He was broad-shouldered, built like a truck, with a mohawk that had gone gray at the edges and hands that had seen combat. 20 years in the Marines, 3 tours overseas. He'd watched men die in ways that still visited him at 3 a.m. But right now, in this gas station parking lot, his eyes were fixed on something that made his stomach turn. A grown man, a little boy on the ground, a hand raised to strike. "Hey!" Rebel's voice boomed across the lot. "Back off!" The motorcycles around him went quiet. One by one, the engines cut. In the sudden silence, you could hear the neon sign buzzing. You could hear Malik whimpering on the ground. You could hear Dice Morgan's sharp intake of breath as he turned and saw what was coming toward him. 30 bikers. They moved like a wave. Leather vests, heavy boots, faces that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. They weren't a gang, not in the way Dice understood gangs, but they looked like one. Tattoos covered their arms. Beards hung to their chests. Their eyes were hard. Dice froze. Doc Martinez reached Malik first. He was stocky, 63 years old, with a Vietnam veteran patch on one sleeve and a paramedic certification on the other. His knees weren't what they used to be, but he dropped down beside the boy anyway, ignoring the pain that shot through his joints. "Easy, little man," Doc said softly. "Easy. I got you." Malik flinched at the touch. He couldn't help it. Touch meant pain in his world. But Doc's hands were gentle. They didn't grab, they didn't squeeze, they just steadied. Behind Doc, Sarge stepped between Malik and Dice. Sarge was a former cop, 15 years on the force before he'd had enough of watching good people get chewed up by bad systems. He knew how to read a situation in 3 seconds flat. And what he was reading right now made his blood run cold. Kid on the ground, barefoot in winter, bruise already forming on his cheek. Adult male with his hand raised to strike again. This wasn't discipline. This was abuse, plain and simple. "You want to step back," Sarge said to Dice. His voice was calm, almost friendly. But his eyes weren't friendly at all. Dice sputtered. "This ain't your business, man. That's my nephew. I said, step back." 2 more bikers flanked Sarge. One of them was Bulldog Baker. Bulldog was usually the quiet one. He'd sit in the back during club meetings, lost in his own thoughts, barely saying a word. But right now his eyes were locked on Dice with an intensity that made the bigger man take an involuntary step backward. The 4th biker was Snake, tall, lean, with a voice like gravel. He didn't say anything at all. He just cracked his knuckles and waited. Dice looked from face to face. These weren't street punks he could intimidate. These weren't scared neighbors who would look the other way. These were grown men with hard hands and harder eyes. And they were all staring at him like he was something they'd found on the bottom of their boots. "Look," Dice started, trying to find his footing. "You don't understand. The kid ran off. I was just..." "Just what?" Rebel had reached them now. He stood directly in front of Dice, close enough that their breath mingled in the cold air. "Just slapping a 7-year-old across the face? Just knocking him to the ground? Just standing over him with your hand raised like you were about to do it again?" Dice's jaw worked. No words came out. On the ground, Doc was helping Malik sit up. The boy's eyes were wide, darting between the bikers and Dice, trying to figure out if he'd just traded one danger for another. His whole body shook, not just from the cold, from everything. "You okay, buddy?" Doc asked gently. "Can you tell me your name?" Malik's lips trembled. "Malik." "Malik. That's a good name. Strong name." Doc kept his voice soft, the way you talk to a spooked animal. "I'm Doc. These are my friends. We're not going to hurt you. Okay? Nobody's going to hurt you while we're here." Malik looked at Doc's face. Weathered skin, gray beard, eyes that were tired but kind. Then his gaze drifted to the patch on Doc's vest. It showed a skull with angel wings. and beneath it were words Malik had to squint to read in the dim light. "Baka," he whispered, sounding out the letters. "That's right," Doc nodded. "Bikers Against Child Abuse. You know what that means?" Malik shook his head. "It means we protect kids. That's what we do. We ride around looking for kids who are scared, kids who are hurt, kids who need help. And when we find them, we don't leave until they're safe." Doc squeezed Malik's shoulder gently. "You understand what I'm telling you, Malik?" Malik's bottom lip quivered. He looked at Dice, still surrounded by bikers, still trying to talk his way out of this. Then he looked back at Doc. He slapped me," Malik whispered. His voice cracked on the words. He hits me at home. He hits me and my sister. And nobody ever—" He couldn't finish. The tears came instead. Doc's jaw tightened. He pulled Malik close, letting the boy cry against his chest. Over the kid's head, he met Rebel's eyes. The message passed between them without words. This wasn't just tonight. This was something worse. Rebel turned back to Dice. When he spoke, his voice had dropped even lower. Quieter. More dangerous. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand right there. You're not going to move. You're not going to say a word. And you're going to wait while we figure out what to do with you. Nod if you understand." Dice hesitated. His eyes flicked toward his car, parked 20 feet away. Calculating. Could he make it? Could he run? Snake took a step to the left, cutting off the path. Bulldog took a step to the right. The circle tightened. Dice nodded. "Smart man," Rebel said. But his eyes said something different. His eyes said, "I know what you are, and you're not getting away with it." Behind them, Malik was still crying into Doc's chest. But something had shifted. His grip on the canvas bag had loosened. His breathing was slowing. For the first time, in as long as he could remember, someone had stepped between him and the monster. Someone had said, "Enough." And in that moment, on that cold parking lot, Malik felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The bikers stayed in formation around Dice, while Doc worked on calming Malik down. Sarge was already on his phone, voice low, talking to someone about the situation. Rebel hadn't taken his eyes off Dice. Not once. "I know you," Dice said suddenly, trying to regain some ground. "I've seen you guys around. You think you're heroes or something? Riding around on your little bikes pretending you matter?" Nobody answered him. "This is kidnapping," Dice pressed. "You know that, right? Taking a kid who ain't yours, that's a felony. I'll have cops here in 5 minutes. See how tough you are then." Rebel smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Call them," he said. "Please. I'd love to explain to the police why a grown man was beating a barefoot child in a parking lot at 10 o'clock at night. I'd love to show them the bruise on his face, the fear in his eyes. I'm sure they'll be real interested in your side of the story." Dice's confidence flickered. I wasn't beating him. I was disciplining him. There's a difference." "Is there?" Rebel stepped closer. "Because from where I was standing, it looked like you slapped a 7-year-old hard enough to knock him down. It looked like you were about to do it again. And it looked like that little boy was so scared of you that he curled up in a ball and waited for the pain." Rebel's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's not discipline. That's not parenting. That's not love. That's abuse. And we don't let that slide." Dice said nothing. Off to the side, Doc had gotten Malik to his feet. The boy was still shaking, but the tears had slowed. He kept one hand pressed against his swollen cheek. the other clutching his canvas bag. Inside, the teddy bear's ear poked out through a hole in the fabric. "Malik," Doc said gently, "we're going to get you somewhere warm, okay? Somewhere safe. Would you like that?" Malik looked at Dice, then at the bikers, then back at Doc. "He'll find me," Malik whispered. "He always finds me. And when he does, he won't," Doc said firmly. "Not tonight. Maybe not ever again, but definitely not tonight. I promise you that." Malik's eyes searched Doc's face for the lie, for the catch, for the moment when this would all turn bad, the way everything in his life always turned bad. He didn't find it. Slowly, carefully, Malik reached out and took Doc's hand. "Okay," he said. His voice was barely audible. "Okay." Doc squeezed his hand. "That's my brave boy. Come on, let's get you warm." As they walked toward the row of motorcycles, Malik glanced back once at Dice. The man stood in a circle of leather and chrome, smaller than Malik had ever seen him. For the first time in his life, the monster didn't look so scary. It was the bikers who looked scary now. And for once, that was exactly what Malik nutted. The Bikers Club trailer sat 3 blocks from the gas station, tucked behind a chain-link fence on a dead-end street. It wasn't much to look at. Peeling paint, a crooked step, windows covered with old blankets instead of curtains. But it was warm inside, and right now, that was all that mattered. Doc guided Malik through the door first. The boy's bare feet touched carpet for the first time in hours, and he almost cried at how soft it felt. The trailer smelled like coffee and motor oil, with a hint of something fried lingering from an earlier meal. A single lamp cast yellow light across mismatched furniture, a worn couch, a couple of folding chairs, a coffee table covered in motorcycle magazines, and empty mugs. "Sit here, buddy." Doc eased Malik onto the couch and draped a rumpled blanket around his shoulders. "Let me get you some water." Malik pulled the blanket tight. His hands were still shaking. He watched Doc move to a small kitchen area, fill a glass from the tap, and bring it back. The water was cool and clean. Malik drank it so fast, he almost choked. "Slow down," Doc said gently. "There's more. You don't have to rush." Rebel came through the door next, followed by Sarge and Bulldog. Snake stayed outside to keep watch. Nobody said it out loud, but they all knew Dice wasn't the type to let things go. He'd be looking for the boy. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but he'd come. The trailer felt smaller with all of them inside. These were big men, taking up space with their broad shoulders and heavy boots. But they moved carefully around Malik, keeping their distance, giving him room to breathe. They understood something most people didn't. When you've been hurt by adults, the last thing you need is more adults crowding you. Rebel pulled a folding chair close to the couch and sat down. His knees popped. He was getting old for this life, and nights like tonight reminded him of it. "Malik," he said quietly, "I know you're scared. I know you don't know us, but we need to understand what's been happening to you. Can you tell us?" Malik stared at the floor. His grip tightened on the canvas bag in his lap. The teddy bear's ear was still poking out, soft and brown, a small reminder of why he'd run in the first place. "I'll get in trouble," Malik whispered. "No, you won't." Rebel's voice was firm, but kind. "Whatever you tell us stays in this room. And even if it didn't, you're not the one who did anything wrong. You understand? You didn't do anything wrong." Malik's eyes flicked up, met Rebel's, then dropped again. "He said I left the TV on," Malik said. His voice was barely above a breath. That's why he was mad. I left it on when I went to bed. He said I was wasting electricity. He said I was costing him money. Doc settled into a chair across from them, his paramedic instincts kicking in. He was watching Malik's body language, the way the boy hunched, the way he flinched at sudden sounds, the way he kept one eye on the door, like he expected it to burst open any second. "And he hit you for that?" Doc asked gently. Malik nodded. "He always yells first, then he hits, but tonight was worse. I tried to run. I thought maybe if I got to the store, someone would—" He trailed off. The sentence didn't need finishing. "Does this happen a lot?" Sarge asked. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, face unreadable, but his eyes were sharp. Malik hesitated, then nodded again. "Every day?" "Almost." Malik's voice cracked. "When he's home. When he's been drinking. Sometimes for no reason at all. He gets mad. And I'm there. So he hits me." Bulldog hadn't said a word since entering the trailer. He stood near the door, silent as always, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. But his jaw was tight. His eyes never left Malik. "What about your aunt?" Rebel asked. "Does she know what's happening?" Malik's face twisted, something between anger and pain. "She knows. She doesn't stop him. Sometimes she yells at him to calm down, but then she goes to her room, and he does whatever he wants." Doc leaned forward. "Malik, can I look at your cheek? Just to make sure you're okay?" Malik tensed. But after a moment, he nodded. Doc moved slowly, telegraphing every motion. He tilted the lamp closer and examined the bruise blooming across Malik's jaw, purple and red, already swelling. It would hurt for days. "This is fresh," Doc murmured. "But I'm betting it's not the only one. Is it, Malik?" Silence. "I'm not going to be mad," Doc said softly. "And I'm not going to hurt you. I just need to know what we're dealing with. Can you show me?" Malik sat frozen for a long moment. The bikers waited. Outside, a dog barked somewhere in the distance. The wind rattled the trailer's thin walls. Then, slowly, Malik set his canvas bag aside. He reached for the hem of his sweatshirt. His hands trembled as he lifted it. Nobody made a sound. Malik's torso was a map of pain. Old bruises, faded to yellow and green. Newer ones, still dark. A thin scar ran along his ribs, healed now, but the mark remained. Whoever had hurt this boy hadn't done it once. They'd done it over and over for a long time. Doc's breath caught in his throat. In Vietnam, he'd seen things that still haunted him. But this was different. This was a child. A 7-year-old child who should have been worried about homework and cartoons and what was for dinner. Not this. Never this. "Malik," Doc said, and his voice was thick. "How long has this been going on?" Malik pulled his sweatshirt down. He wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. "Since Dice moved in," he said quietly. "About a year, I think, maybe more. I don't remember exactly. A year. 12 months of beatings, of terror, of hiding bruises and making excuses and praying that tonight wouldn't be the night that went too far." Rebel stood up abruptly. He walked to the far end of the trailer, his back to the room. One hand pressed against the wall. His shoulders rose and fell with deep, controlled breaths. He was trying not to show the boy how angry he was. Malik had seen enough angry men. "He took my dinner last week," Malik continued. The words were coming faster now, tumbling out like he couldn't stop them. "Said I didn't deserve to eat. Said I was useless. Said my mom should have died sooner so she didn't have to see what a waste I turned out to be." Bulldog's fist hit the wall. Everyone jumped, Malik most of all. He scrambled backward on the couch, eyes wide, waiting for the violence he was sure would follow. "Sorry." Bulldog's voice was rough. He pulled his hand back, knuckles scraped, but not bleeding. "Sorry, kid. That wasn't about you. I just—" He couldn't finish. He walked outside instead. The door banged shut behind him. Sarge moved to take Bulldog's spot near the entrance. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes told a different story. Cold fury, barely contained. "This kid's been living in hell," Sarge said quietly, mostly to himself. "And nobody did a damn thing." Malik was watching Bulldog through the window, confused. "Is he mad at me?" "No, buddy." Doc sat on the couch beside him, careful to leave space between them. "He's mad at the people who hurt you. We all are. But not at you. Never at you." Malik processed this. It took a while. Anger that wasn't directed at him was a foreign concept. "I have something," he said suddenly. "In my bag. I made it at school. My teacher said she said I should show someone. But I was scared. Dice said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I went away. Like to a foster home or something. Somewhere worse. Can I see it?" Rebel had returned to the group, composed now, his fury locked down tight. Malik hesitated. Then he reached into his canvas bag and pulled out 2 crumpled pieces of paper. The first was a crude map, drawn in pencil on lined notebook paper. It showed a house, a street, and what might have been a school. At the top, in shaky handwriting, were 4 words, "Help me, Auntie beats us." The second paper was a crayon drawing. 2 small figures, a boy and a smaller girl, standing beneath gray storm clouds. Rain fell around them in blue streaks. Neither figure was smiling. In the corner, a larger figure loomed with red hands. Doc took the papers carefully, like they were made of glass. He looked at them for a long time. Then he passed them to Rebel. "This is evidence," Sarge said flatly. "Real evidence." "A teacher saw this." Malik nodded. "Mrs. Patterson. She asked me about it, but I got scared and said I made it up. She looked sad, but she didn't push." "Teachers are mandatory reporters," Sarge muttered. "She should have called CPS anyway." "Maybe she did," Doc said. "Maybe she didn't. Either way, nothing happened. This kid's still in that house." "Not anymore," Rebel said. He folded the papers carefully and slipped them into his vest. "Not ever again." Malik looked up at him. "You mean it?" "I mean it." "But Dice will find me. He always finds me. And my sister. Keisha's still there. She's only 4. If I'm not there to protect her." The trailer went silent. "You have a sister?" Doc asked. Malik nodded miserably. "She's little. She doesn't understand what's happening. She just cries a lot. I try to keep her quiet so Dice doesn't get mad, but sometimes I can't. And when he hits me, at least he's not hitting her. But if I'm gone—" His voice broke. Doc pulled Malik into a hug. The boy stiffened at first, unused to gentle touch. Then slowly, he let himself be held. His small body shook with sobs he'd been holding back for months. Years, maybe. "We're going to help your sister, too," Doc said into his hair. "I promise you, we're not leaving either of you behind." While Doc comforted Malik, Sarge and Rebel stepped outside. The night had grown colder. Stars were visible between the clouds, sharp and indifferent. Bulldog was pacing near the motorcycles, burning off energy he couldn't use any other way. "We got a problem," Sarge said quietly. "We got about 12 problems," Rebel replied. "Which one you talking about?" "This guy Dice. I know the type. Street-level muscle. Maybe some dealing on the side. He's got friends in low places. The kind of friends who don't ask questions when someone needs to disappear. Rebel nodded slowly. You think he'll come after the kid? I think he already is. Men like him, they don't let things go. That boy embarrassed him tonight. Made him look weak. He'll want payback. Then we don't let him get it. Sarge pulled out his phone. I'm gonna make some calls. I still got contacts on the force. People who owe me favors. But Rebel, you need to understand something. What? This kid's black. In this system, that matters. I've read the reports. Black families get investigated at higher rates. Black children get fewer services when they're placed. And black parents, or guardians, they're rarely believed, even when the evidence is right there. Sarge shook his head. If we hand this boy to CPS, there's a good chance he ends up somewhere worse, or he ends up right back where he started. Rebel's jaw tightened. Then we don't hand him over. We might not have a choice. Sarge gestured toward the street. That's the other problem. Red and blue lights were flashing at the end of the block. A police cruiser, moving slowly, spotlight sweeping across front yards. Dice called them, Rebel said. It wasn't a question. Bet you $50 he told them we kidnapped the kid. Made us sound like a bunch of thugs snatching children off the street. Sarge's voice was bitter. Irony is, we're the good guys here. But we look like the threat, and he knows it. Inside the trailer, Malik must have seen the lights too. His face appeared at the window, pale and terrified. What do we do? Bulldog asked. He'd stopped pacing and joined them near the fence. Rebel thought for a long moment. The police cruiser was getting closer. They had maybe 2 minutes before it reached the trailer. We play it straight, he said finally. We don't run. We don't hide. We show them the evidence, the bruises, the drawings, the kid's own words. We make them see the truth. And if they don't believe us? Rebel looked at Bulldog, then at Sarge, then at the window where Malik's scared face was pressed against the glass. Then we figure out Plan B. The police cruiser pulled up outside the fence just as Rebel stepped back into the trailer. Malik was off the couch, backed into a corner, eyes wide with panic. They're gonna take me, he gasped. They're gonna give me back to him. Please, please don't let them take me. Rebel crossed to him in 3 strides. He knelt down so they were eye level, face to face, man to boy. Malik, listen to me. His voice was calm, steady, the voice he'd used to lead men through firefights. I'm not gonna let anyone take you back to that house. Not tonight. Not ever. You understand? Malik's breathing was ragged. But the police? The police are going to hear your story. They're going to see your bruises. They're going to look at what you drew and read what you wrote. And they're going to understand that you're not the criminal here. Dice is. But what if they don't believe me? What if they believe him? Rebel put his hands on Malik's shoulders. Gentle but firm. Then I'll make them believe. I'll fight for you, Malik. Me and Doc and Sarge and Bulldog and every single one of those guys outside, we'll fight for you until you're safe. That's what we do. That's who we are. Malik stared at him, searching for the lie, for the catch, for the betrayal that always came. He didn't find it. You promise? His voice was tiny. I promise. Rebel didn't blink. We're here for children who are in fear, and we don't leave until they're not in fear anymore. You're stuck with us now, kid, whether you like it or not. A knock sounded at the door, heavy, official. Police, Open up, Malik whimpered. Rebel squeezed his shoulders once more. Stay behind me. Don't say anything unless I tell you to. And whatever happens, remember what I said. I'm not letting them take you back. He stood up and walked to the door. If you believe that sometimes the scariest-looking people have the biggest hearts, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Biker's Bite and hit that notification bell, because stories like Malik's happen every day. And we're here to make sure they don't end in tragedy. Stick with us. This fight is just getting started. The two officers at the door looked exactly like Malik had expected. Uniforms, badges, hands resting near their belts. One was older, gray at the temples, with a gut that strained against his shirt. The other was younger, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that scanned the room like he was expecting trouble. "We got a call," the older officer said. "Man reported his nephew was taken by a group of bikers. Said you threatened him." Rebel stood in the doorway, blocking their view of Malik. "That man hit a 7-year-old child in front of 30 witnesses. We didn't take the boy. We protected him." The younger officer craned his neck, trying to see past Rebel's bulk. "Where's the kid now?" "Inside. Safe. With people who won't hurt him." "Sir, we need to see the child. Make sure he's okay." Rebel didn't move. "And I need to make sure you're not going to hand him back to his abuser." The older officer's face hardened. "That's not your call to make." Behind Rebel, Sarge stepped forward. He pulled out his wallet and flipped it open, revealing an old badge. "Sergeant Marcus Webb, retired. 15 years with Metro PD. I know the protocols. I know the law. And I know what child abuse looks like." He gestured toward the couch, where Malik was huddled under his blanket, watching with terrified eyes. "That boy has bruises on his face from tonight, scars on his body from months of beatings, and drawings he made at school begging for help. You want to do your job? Start by listening to him." The officers exchanged a glance. The younger one's hand had drifted away from his belt. Something in Sarge's voice had gotten through. "Can we come in?" the older officer asked. His tone had shifted, still official, but softer. Rebel looked at Sarge. Sarge nodded. "Fine," Rebel said. "But you talk to the kid gently. You scare him, and we're going to have a problem." He stepped aside. The officers entered the trailer. It felt even smaller now, packed with bikers and cops, and one very scared little boy. Doc had positioned himself next to Malik on the couch, close enough to offer comfort, far enough not to crowd. "Hey there, buddy." The younger officer crouched down to Malik's level. His voice was surprisingly gentle. "My name's Officer Chen. Can you tell me your name?" Malik's eyes darted to Rebel. Rebel nodded. "Malik," the boy whispered. "Malik, that's a good name. Listen, Malik, I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? You're not in trouble. I just need to understand what happened tonight." Malik clutched his canvas bag tighter. "He hit me." "Who hit you?" "Dice, my auntie's boyfriend. Can you show me where he hit you?" Malik pointed to his cheek. The bruise had darkened in the past hour, purple and angry against his brown skin. Officer Chen's jaw tightened. He'd seen a lot of things on the job, but kids always got to him. "Has he hit you before, Malik?" Silence. Malik looked at Doc. "It's okay," Doc said softly. "Tell him the truth." Malik's bottom lip trembled. "Yes." "How many times?" "I don't know. A lot. Maybe every week, sometimes more." Officer Chen stood up slowly. He turned to his partner and spoke in a low voice that Malik couldn't hear, but the bikers caught it. "We need to call this in. Get a detective down here, and probably CPS." The older officer nodded. He stepped outside to make the call. Sarge moved closer to Officer Chen. "I've got a contact in the Detective Bureau. Marcus Rivera. He's good with kids, and he knows how to handle cases like this. You mind if I give him a heads up?" Chen hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead. The more eyes on this, the better." While Sarge made his call, Doc pulled the drawings from his pocket. He handed them to Chen without a word. The officer looked at the crude map first. "Help me, Auntie beats us." Then the crayon drawing, 2 children under storm clouds, a figure with red hands looming in the corner. "He made these?" Chen asked. "At school. His teacher saw them. Nobody followed up." Chen's expression shifted. Something cold settled in his eyes. "Where's the man who did this? Dice?" "Last we saw, he was at the gas station on MLK and 5th, Rebel said. "But a man like that doesn't stay put. He's probably looking for the boy right now." "Then we need to find him before he finds you." Detective Marcus Rivera arrived 20 minutes later. He was a tall man, late 40s, with a shaved head and a face that had seen too much and forgotten none of it. He shook Sarge's hand at the door. "Marcus, been a while." "Too long, Webb. Wish it was under better circumstances. Don't we all?" Rivera entered the trailer and took in the scene with practiced efficiency. Bikers lining the walls, officers by the door, a small boy on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, eyes red from crying. He crossed to Malik and knelt down. His movements were slow, deliberate. He understood that sudden motion could trigger a child who'd been hurt. "Hey, Malik, I'm Detective Rivera. I work with the police, but I'm not here to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I'm here to listen. Can you tell me what's been happening at home?" What followed was the hardest 30 minutes of Malik's life. He told the detective everything: the hitting, the yelling, the nights without dinner, the names Dice called him, the threats about what would happen if he ever told anyone. And through it all, his voice never rose above a whisper, and his hands never stopped shaking. Doc held his hand the whole time. When Malik finished, Rivera stood up. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes told a different story. "Officer Chen, I want you to put out a bolo on Dice Morgan. Description matches what the boy and these witnesses provided. Consider him dangerous." "Yes, sir." "And get a social worker here. We need to document these injuries properly and start the process of removing this child from that home." Malik's head snapped up. "What about my sister?" Rivera paused. "Your sister?" "Keisha. She's 4. She's still at the house, with my auntie. And if Dice comes back..." The detective's expression softened. "We'll get your sister too, Malik. I promise. Nobody's leaving her behind." The next hour was a blur of activity. A social worker arrived, a tired woman named Mrs. Patterson, ironically the same name as Malik's teacher. She documented his injuries with photographs and careful notes. She asked questions he'd already answered, but he answered them again because Doc told him it was important. Through it all, the bikers stayed. They didn't have to. The police were there now. The system was engaged. They could have ridden off into the night. Their good deed done, their consciences clear. But they stayed. Bulldog brought Malik a candy bar from the gas station down the street. Snake stood guard outside the trailer, watching for any sign of Dice. Rebel sat in the corner, quiet but present, his eyes never leaving the boy. And when Malik's courage finally broke, when the questions became too much and the fear too heavy, it was Doc who pulled him close and let him cry. I know it's hard, Doc murmured into his hair. I know you're scared, but you're doing so good, Malik. You're so brave. And when this is over, you're never going back to that place. You hear me? Never. Malik sobbed into his chest. But what if they don't believe me? They believe you. Look at their faces. They believe every word. But what if Dice? Dice can't hurt you anymore. Not with us here. Not with the police here. He's done, Malik. You just don't know it yet. Around midnight, Detective Rivera got a call. His face went tight as he listened. Where? A pause. Keep units on standby. I'm on my way. He hung up and turned to Rebel. They spotted Morgan's car near the group home on Dexter Avenue. That's where the boy's aunt lives, right? Malik went pale. That's where Keisha is. Rivera held up a hand. We've got units en route. They'll secure the scene before we arrive. With respect, Detective, Rebel said, standing up. We're coming too. Rivera hesitated. This is a police matter now. We can't have civilians. That's his sister in that house. He's not staying here while she's in danger, and neither are we. For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension in the trailer was thick enough to cut. Then Rivera sighed. Stay back. Stay out of the way. And for God's sake, don't do anything that'll make me arrest you. Rebel almost smiled. No promises. The ride to Dexter Avenue was unlike anything Malik had ever experienced. 30 motorcycles rolled through the empty streets, engines rumbling in unison, headlights cutting through the darkness. Malik sat on Rebel's bike, a spare helmet swallowing his small head, his arms wrapped tight around the big man's waist. The wind was cold against his face, but he barely felt it. For the first time in his life, he felt powerful. These men, these scary, tattooed, leather-clad men, were riding for him, fighting for him. They barely knew his name, and yet here they were, roaring through the night to save his sister. Bulldog pulled up alongside them at a red light. He looked over at Malik and gave a single nod. We're here for children that are in fear, he said, his voice cutting through the engine noise. And we don't leave until they're not in fear anymore. We ain't leaving till you aren't scared, kid. Malik couldn't speak, but he nodded back. The light turned green. The bikes surged forward. Behind them, police cruisers followed with their lights off, silent as ghosts. Whatever was waiting at Dexter Avenue, they would face it together. The group home on Dexter Avenue was a 2-story building with peeling paint and bars on the lower windows. It sat at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by overgrown lots and abandoned cars, the kind of place people forgot existed until something terrible happened there. Tonight, something terrible was about to end. The bikers arrived first. They parked their motorcycles in a loose semicircle, blocking the street, engines idling. 30 men stepped off their bikes and formed a wall of leather and chrome. Nobody spoke. Nobody had to. Detective Rivera pulled up moments later with 3 squad cars behind him. Officers poured out, hands on weapons, eyes scanning the scene. Everyone stay back, Rivera ordered. Let us clear the front door of the group home slammed open. Dice Morgan stood in the doorway. He looked worse than he had at the gas station. Wild-eyed, sweating despite the cold. In his right hand, he held a heavy chain, the links wrapped around his fist like brass knuckles. "Where is he?" Dice screamed, his voice cracked with rage. "Where's the little rat?" Nobody answered. Dice's eyes found the wall of bikers, found Rebel standing at the front, found Malik half hidden behind the big man's legs. "You!" Dice pointed with the chain. "You think you can take what's mine? That boy belongs to me. He's family, and you're going to give him back, or I swear to God." "Put it down." Rebel's voice was calm, almost bored. "Put the chain down, Dice." "Or what? You going to beat me up? 30 on 1? That's real brave, man. Real tough." Sarge stepped forward. "Drop it, Morgan. There are police right behind us. This is over." "It ain't over." Dice was shaking now, cornered animal energy. "It ain't over until I say it's over. That kid ruined everything. He talked, didn't he? Told you his little sob story? Well, he's a liar. He's been lying since the day he was born. His mama was a liar, too. And look where it got her." Malik flinched. Rebel felt it through his leather jacket, the way the boy's whole body contracted at the mention of his mother. Something shifted in Rebel's eyes. "You don't get to talk about his mother," Rebel said quietly. "You don't get to talk about him at all. In fact, from now on, you don't get to do anything except answer questions in an interrogation room. Because you're done, Dice. You just don't know it yet." Dice's face twisted. The last shreds of his composure fell away. "I'll kill you," he snarled. "I'll kill all of you." He lunged. It happened fast. Dice swung the chain in a wild arc, aiming for Rebel's head. But Rebel was already moving, ducking under the blow, creating space. And before Dice could wind up for another swing, Bulldog was there. The big man caught Dice's arm in a grip like a vice. Twisted. The chain fell from suddenly nerveless fingers. Dice yelped in pain and tried to pull free, but 2 more bikers were already there, hemming him in, pinning his arms. It was over in less than 5 seconds. Dice thrashed and screamed, cursing at them, threatening them, promising revenge. But he wasn't going anywhere. 4 men held him, their faces expressionless, their hands firm but not violent. "Easy," Bulldog said quietly. "Easy now." Detective Rivera pushed through the crowd. He pulled out handcuffs and snapped them around Dice's wrists with practiced efficiency. "Dice Morgan, you're under arrest for assault, child abuse, and making terroristic threats. You have the right to remain silent." He yanked Dice toward the nearest squad car. "I suggest you use it." Dice kept screaming as they loaded him into the back seat. Accusations, denials, threats. The door slammed shut, cutting him off mid-sentence. And then it was quiet. Malik stood frozen behind Rebel, unable to process what he'd just seen. The monster who had haunted his nightmares for a year was gone, handcuffed, locked in a police car, powerless. "Malik?" He looked up. Rebel was kneeling in front of him, that weathered face softened with something that might have been tenderness. "It's over, buddy. He can't hurt you anymore." Malik's bottom lip trembled. "Really? Really, I promise." From inside the group home, a new sound emerged. Small footsteps, a child's voice, confused and scared. "Malik!" Malik's head whipped around. In the doorway stood a tiny girl, maybe 4 years old, with her hair in messy braids and her nightgown wrinkled. Her eyes were huge in her small face. "Keisha!" Malik broke away from Rebel and ran. He swept his sister into his arms and held her tight, burying his face in her hair. She was crying. He was crying. Neither of them could form words. The bikers watched in silence. Some turned away, wiping at their eyes when they thought no one was looking. These were hard men, men who had seen combat, men who had buried friends. But this, 2 children clinging to each other, finally safe, this undid them. Doc was the first to approach. He knelt beside the siblings, his voice gentle. "Hey there, Keisha. I'm Doc. I'm a friend of your brother's. Are you okay? Keisha peeked at him over Malik's shoulder. She sniffled. The scary man was yelling. I know, sweetheart, but the scary man is gone now. He's not coming back. Promise? Doc looked at Malik. Malik looked at Doc. Promise, they said together. Before we see what happens next, hit that like button if you're rooting for Malik. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because stories like this, stories of kids fighting for survival and strangers fighting alongside them, these are the stories that need to be heard. Your engagement helps us bring more of them to light. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Paramedics arrived and examined both children. Keisha was physically unharmed, though clearly shaken. Malik's injuries were documented again, this time by medical professionals who added their notes to the growing file. Malik's aunt, a thin, tired woman named Sharon, was found upstairs cowering in her bedroom. She claimed she didn't know what Dice was doing, claimed she tried to stop him, claimed she was a victim too. Maybe some of it was true, maybe none of it was. Either way, she wasn't getting those kids back tonight. Or any night soon. Detective Rivera worked his phone, making calls, pulling strings. By 3 a.m., he had an answer. Found something, he told Rebel, who hadn't left Malik's side. The boy's grandmother, his mother's aunt, lives about 40 minutes from here. Name's Beatrice Walker, 62 years old, clean record, sober for 15 years. And she's been looking for these kids since their mother died? Rebel's eyebrows rose. Looking for them? The system lost track. Happens more than you'd think, especially with black families. Kids slip through the cracks, but she never stopped trying. When I called her just now and told her what happened, Rivera paused. She started crying, said she'd be here in an hour. Malik, who had been listening from a few feet away, looked up. I have a grandma? Rivera crouched down to his level. You have a great aunt, technically, but she wants to be your grandma, if you'll let her. She wants to take care of you and your sister, give you a real home. Malik's eyes went wide. He looked at Rebel, at Doc, at the circle of bikers who had somehow become his protectors. Can I? He hesitated. Can I still see them, the bikers, even if I go live with my grandma? Rebel's face split into a rare smile. Kid, you're stuck with us now. We don't disappear just because the crisis is over. You're family. That means Friday pizza. That means bike rides on your birthday. That means we're always just a phone call away. Malik's eyes filled with tears. But for the first time that night, they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of hope. Beatrice Walker arrived at 4:17 a.m. She was a stout woman with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. She wore a coat thrown over her nightgown and slippers that didn't match. She'd clearly left the house the moment she got the call. When she saw Malik and Keisha sitting on the back of the ambulance, wrapped in blankets, she stopped. One hand went to her mouth. The other reached out, trembling. "Oh, my babies," she whispered. "Oh, my sweet babies." Malik looked at her, studied her face, found something there, maybe a trace of his mother, maybe something else entirely, that made his chest ache. Are you really our grandma?" Beatrice crossed to them and knelt down, ignoring the cold ground seeping through her nightgown. "I'm your great-aunt, baby. Your mama was my niece. I loved her so much, and I've been looking for you two for so long." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner." Keisha, too young to understand everything, understood enough. She reached for Beatrice with both arms. "Grandma?" Beatrice scooped her up and held her close. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. "That's right, baby. I'm your grandma, and I'm never letting you go again." Malik watched them. Something hard inside him, something he'd built to survive, began to crack. "Me too?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You want me to?" Beatrice freed one arm and pulled him into the embrace. All three of them, huddled together in the cold morning, crying and holding each other like they'd found something precious they thought was lost forever. Behind them, Detective Rivera watched with something like satisfaction. He caught Rebel's eye and walked over. "I gotta admit," the detective said quietly, "when I first heard about a bunch of bikers taking a kid from a gas station, I thought we had a situation. Never expected this." "We get that a lot," Rebel replied. "People see the leather and the tattoos and assume the worst." "Yeah, well," Rivera glanced at the family reunion still unfolding by the ambulance. "Tonight you were heroes. Those kids would be back in that house right now if you hadn't stepped in. We just did what anyone should do. But most people don't. That's the point." Rivera held out his hand. "Thank you. From the city. From those kids. From everyone who gives a damn about children who can't protect themselves." Rebel shook it. "Just doing our job." The sun was starting to rise. Pink and orange streaks painted the horizon, burning away the darkness of the night. As the first real light touched the street, Malik pulled away from his grandmother and walked over to Rebel. He was small, barefoot still. The borrowed blanket dragged behind him like a cape. He stopped in front of Rebel and looked up at him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Malik raised his hand in a tiny salute. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Rebel knelt down. He returned the salute, crisp and military. "Anytime, soldier, anytime." Dawn broke over Dexter Avenue like a promise. The sky shifted from black to gray to pale gold, and the street lights blinked off one by one. The police cruisers had gone. The ambulance had gone. Even the curious neighbors who'd peeked through their curtains had retreated back to bed. But the bikers stayed. They sat on their motorcycles or leaned against the chain-link fence, drinking coffee from foam cups, speaking in low voices, waiting, not because they had to, because they wanted to make sure the story ended right. Inside Beatrice Walker's borrowed minivan, a neighbor had offered it when he saw what was happening. Malik sat in the back seat with Keisha asleep on his lap. The little girl had cried herself out an hour ago, exhausted by fear and confusion and the overwhelming relief of being held by people who meant her no harm. Now she slept with her thumb in her mouth, her face peaceful for the first time in longer than Malik could remember. Doc climbed into the front passenger seat. He handed Malik a cup of warm milk he'd gotten from the gas station down the block. "Drink this," he said. "You need something in your stomach." Malik took the cup. His hands were steadier than they'd been all night. He sipped the milk and felt the warmth spread through his chest. "Is it really over?" he asked quietly. "Like, really?" Doc turned around in his seat. His weathered face softened. "It's really over, buddy. Dice is in jail. Your Aunt Sharon is being questioned. And your great-aunt Beatrice is going to take you home as soon as the paperwork clears." "What about—" Malik hesitated. He looked down at Keisha's sleeping face. "What if she doesn't want us? What if she changes her mind? Did you see her face when she saw you too? Malik nodded slowly. He remembered. The tears, the trembling hands, the way she'd held them both like they were the most precious things in the world. That woman's been searching for you since your mama died, Doc said. She went to the police. She went to social services. She called every number she could find. The system kept telling her they'd look into it, and they never did. But she never gave up. Not once. He reached back and squeezed Malik's knee gently. She's not changing her mind, Malik. You're her family, and she's been waiting 2 years to bring you home. Malik's eyes filled with tears. He blinked them back. He'd cried enough tonight. The teddy bear, he said suddenly. I almost forgot. He reached into his canvas bag, still clutched in his fist after everything, and pulled out the worn brown teddy bear. Its fur was matted. One ear was bent. A seam along its side had been sewn shut with uneven stitches. I was bringing this to her, Malik said. That's why I left the house. I found it at the thrift store near school. I saved my lunch money for 2 weeks to buy it. He stroked Keisha's hair gently. She doesn't have any toys. Dice threw them all away. I wanted her to have something to hold when she was scared. Doc's throat tightened. In 40 years of life, including 3 tours in Vietnam and 15 years as a paramedic, he'd seen courage in many forms. But this, a 7-year-old saving his lunch money to buy his baby sister a teddy bear, this might have been the bravest thing he'd ever witnessed. You're a good brother, Malik. The best kind. Malik looked at the teddy bear. Then, carefully, he tucked it into the crook of Keisha's arm. The little girl stirred, her fingers closing around the soft fur instinctively. A tiny smile crossed her sleeping face. Now she has something, Malik whispered. Now she's not alone. Outside the van, Rebel was having a quiet conversation with Beatrice. The older woman had calmed down since her arrival, though her eyes were still red from crying. She kept glancing at the minivan, as if afraid the children might disappear if she looked away too long. I don't know how to thank you, she said. Any of you. What you did tonight. You don't need to thank us, Rebel said. This is what we do. But you don't even know us. You don't know Malik or Keisha. And you still... Ma'am, can I tell you something? She nodded. Rebel took a breath. He didn't talk about this often. Most of the guys in the club knew pieces of his story, but not all of it. Tonight, though, felt different. Tonight, it felt important. When I was Malik's age, I was in a situation a lot like his. Different details, same fear. My stepdad was a drunk. He'd come home mad at the world and take it out on me and my mom. I spent years thinking that was just how life was, thinking I deserved it, thinking nobody would believe me if I told them. Beatrice's face shifted, understanding mixed with sorrow. What happened? A teacher figured it out, saw the bruises I was trying to hide. She didn't just report it and walk away. She stayed. She made sure I was safe. She showed up at every hearing, every meeting, every moment that mattered. Rebel paused. I joined the Marines because of her. Learned what it meant to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. And when I got out, I found Baca, because I remembered what it felt like to be a kid with no one in his corner. And I swore I'd never let another child feel that way if I could help it. Beatrice reached out and touched his arm. Her hand was wrinkled but warm. That teacher changed your life. She saved my life. There's a difference. Rebel looked toward the van, where Malik's small face was visible through the window. Maybe tonight we saved his, or at least gave him a chance to save himself. More than a chance, Beatrice said firmly. That boy is coming home with me, he and his sister both, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure they know what it feels like to be loved. Rebel smiled. A real smile, not the careful one he wore for strangers. I believe you, ma'am, and so do they. The paperwork took another 3 hours. Social workers arrived. Forms were filled out. Beatrice's home was verified as safe and appropriate for emergency placement. Phone calls were made to judges and supervisors and anyone else who needed to sign off on 2 children being moved in the middle of the night. Through all of it, the bikers stayed. They made coffee runs. They brought donuts. They stood guard outside whenever Malik started looking nervous, their presence a silent reminder that no one was getting past them to hurt those kids again. By mid-morning, the sun was fully up and the last form had been signed. A social worker named Mrs. Chen, no relation to the officer from earlier, handed Beatrice a folder full of documents and shook her hand. Emergency custody is granted, she said. You'll have a home visit within the week, and we'll schedule a hearing for permanent placement within 60 days. But for now, those children are yours. Beatrice clutched the folder like it was made of gold. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mrs. Chen glanced at the bikers still lingering nearby. Her expression was unreadable. Those men, she said quietly. They stayed all night? They did. In 20 years of social work, I've never seen anything like it. Mrs. Chen shook her head slowly. When dispatch called me about bikers and a kidnapped child, I thought I was walking into a nightmare. Instead, she trailed off, tell them thank you. From someone who's seen too many kids fall through the cracks. Tell them thank you. The goodbye was harder than Malik expected. He stood beside his great-aunt's borrowed van, Keisha holding his hand, facing the row of motorcycles. These men had been strangers 12 hours ago. Now they felt like family. Doc was the first to approach. He knelt down and pulled Malik into a hug. You remember what I told you, okay? If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Rebel's got my number. I'm never more than a phone call away. Malik hugged him back tight. Thank you, Doc, for everything. Thank you, buddy, for being brave enough to ask for help. Bulldog came next. The big man wasn't much for words, but he crouched down and looked Malik in the eye. You did good, kid. Real good. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. He held out his fist. Malik bumped it with his own small fist. Something passed between them, an understanding that didn't need words. Sarge gave Malik a crisp nod. You've got my number, too. And if anyone ever gives you trouble at school or anywhere else, you let me know. I know people. Malik almost smiled. Thanks, Sarge. Finally, Rebel stepped forward. He didn't kneel. Instead, he squatted down so they were at eye level, equal. Respect. Malik, I want you to remember something. Tonight was hard. The hardest night of your life, maybe. But you survived it. You didn't just survive it. You won. You got your sister out. You got yourself out. You stood up to a monster and watched him get hauled away in handcuffs. That took guts, kid. Real guts. Malik's eyes were wet, but he held the tears back. I couldn't have done it without you. Yeah, you could have. Maybe not tonight. Maybe not this way. But sooner or later, you would have found a way out. I can see it in you. That fighter's spirit. It's what survivors have. It's what I had when I was your age. Rebel put a hand on Malik's shoulder. You're gonna be okay, Malik. More than okay. You're gonna be great. And whenever you doubt that, you remember this night. You remember that you're the kid who faced down his demons and won. Malik threw his arms around Rebel's neck. The big man held him, solid and warm, like an anchor in a storm. "Will I see you again?" Malik whispered. "Every Friday," Rebel said. "Pizza at Lou's Diner. We'll pick you up at 6. That's a standing date, soldier. Don't you forget it." "I won't, I promise." They held each other for another long moment. Then Malik pulled back, wiped his eyes, and took his sister's hand. "Come on, Keisha. We're going home." The little girl looked up at the bikers with wide eyes. She didn't understand everything that had happened, but she understood enough. She raised her tiny hand and waved. "Bye-bye, scary men." Bulldog's face cracked into a rare grin. "Bye-bye, little lady." Beatrice helped the children into the van. She paused before climbing into the driver's seat and looked back at the row of bikers. "I meant what I said. I don't know how to thank you." Rebel shrugged. "Take care of those kids. That's thanks enough." "I will. I promise you, I will." She got in the van. The engine started, and slowly, carefully, Beatrice Walker drove her great-niece and great-nephew toward their new life. Malik pressed his face against the back window, watching the bikers grow smaller and smaller until they disappeared around a corner. But he wasn't sad. He knew he'd see them again. 3 months later, everything had changed. Malik stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his new shirt. It was blue, his favorite color, though he'd never told anyone that before. Beatrice had figured it out anyway. She noticed things like that, little things, important things. "Malik, pictures in 5 minutes." "Coming, Grandma." He took one last look at himself. The boy in the mirror was different from the boy who'd been knocked to the ground at that gas station. This boy stood taller. His eyes were clearer. The bruises were gone, faded into memory, replaced by smooth brown skin that had never looked healthier. He still had nightmares sometimes. Still woke up sweating, heart pounding, certain that Dice was standing in his doorway. But the nightmares were getting less frequent. And when they happened, Grandma Beatrice was there. She'd sit on the edge of his bed and rub his back and tell him stories about his mother, until the fear passed. She told him lots of stories about his mother, about how she'd been stubborn and brave and full of laughter, about how she'd loved Malik and Keisha more than anything in the world, about how proud she would be if she could see them now. Malik had started crying the first time Beatrice told him those stories. But after a while, the crying turned to smiling. His mother wasn't just a ghost anymore. She was a person, a real person who had loved him, and that love hadn't disappeared when she died. It lived on in Beatrice, in Malik's memories, in the way he took care of his sister. "Malik! Coming!" He ran downstairs, where Keisha was already posed on the couch in her new dress. The teddy bear sat beside her, wearing a tiny patch Rebel had given her. It showed the Baca logo, a skull with angel wings, and the words, "No child deserves to live in fear." Keisha carried that bear everywhere now. She'd named it Rumble, after the sound the motorcycles made. Beatrice held up her phone camera. "Okay, babies, big smiles." Malik slid onto the couch beside his sister. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him, natural as breathing. "Say cheese!" "Cheese!" The flash went off. In that frozen moment, Malik realized something. He was happy. Actually happy. Not pretending, not surviving, just happy. It was a strange feeling, but he could get used to it. Stories like Malik's remind us why we do this. If his journey touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Subscribe to Biker's Bite and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Because every view, every share, every comment helps us prove that the world is full of unexpected heroes. And there are more kids out there who need to know that help is coming. The school photo went up on Beatrice's refrigerator that same day. Malik and Keisha, side by side, grinning at the camera. Rumble the teddy bear visible in Keisha's arms. It was the first happy picture of them that existed, but it wouldn't be the last. 2 weeks after the photo was taken, Rebel, Doc, and Bulldog showed up at Malik's school for Family Day. The other kids stared. These were not the kind of family members they were used to seeing. Leather vests, tattoos, beards, boots that thudded on the linoleum floor like thunder. But Malik didn't care about the stares. He ran across the gymnasium and threw himself at Rebel, who caught him easily and swung him up onto his shoulders. "Look at you, soldier. You've grown 2 inches since I saw you last." "Have not." "Have too. I'm going to need a bigger bike." Mrs. Patterson, Malik's teacher, the one who'd seen his drawing and almost reported it, watched from across the room. She'd heard bits and pieces of what happened that night. Now, seeing the boy, she'd worried about laughing on the shoulders of a man who looked like he belonged in a police lineup. She felt something loosen in her chest. She'd almost saved him. Almost. But someone else had. And that was what mattered. Later, during the Share Your Family portion of the event, Malik stood at the front of the room with his unusual family behind him. Grandma Beatrice, Rebel, Doc, Bulldog, even Keisha, sitting on Bulldog's massive arm like a princess on a throne. "This is my family," Malik said. His voice was steady, confident, nothing like the whisper he'd used just 3 months ago. "My grandma takes care of me and my sister, and these guys, they're bikers. They helped us when we needed help. They're part of BACA, which stands for Bikers Against Child Abuse. They help kids who are scared." He paused, looked back at Rebel, who nodded encouragingly. "I used to be scared," Malik continued. "A lot. But they taught me that it's okay to ask for help, that there are good people who will fight for you, that you don't have to be strong all by yourself." He stood a little taller. "I'm not scared anymore." The room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping, then someone else. Then the whole gymnasium erupted in applause. Malik blushed, but he was smiling. The Friday pizza tradition started that very week. Every Friday, at 6 o'clock sharp, 2 or 3 motorcycles would rumble up to Beatrice's little house. Malik would run out before they even cut their engines, Keisha trailing behind him with Rumble the bear. They'd ride to Lou's diner, Malik in a helmet that was still a bit too big, Keisha in a sidecar Doc had attached to his bike specifically for her, and they'd eat pizza until their stomachs hurt. It became the highlight of Malik's week. Not just for the pizza, though Lou's did make excellent pizza, but for the way Bulldog ruffled his hair when he said something funny. For the way Doc always asked about school and actually listened to the answers. For the way Rebel treated him like a person, not a kid. Like his opinions mattered. Like he mattered. One Friday, about 4 months after that first night, Malik threw a napkin at Bulldog's head. It was a joke, a silly, childish joke. The kind of thing kids do when they're comfortable, when they feel safe. Bulldog stared at him. That big, scarred face was unreadable. Malik froze. For one horrible second, he was back in that house, back in that life, waiting for the punishment that always came after he did something wrong. Then Bulldog grabbed a handful of napkins and threw them back. Malik ducked, laughed, threw more napkins. Within seconds, the entire booth was engaged in a napkin war, Lou yelling at them good-naturedly from behind the counter, Keisha shrieking with joy as she threw napkins in random directions. When it was over, napkins everywhere, everyone breathless from laughing, Malik looked around the table at these men who had become his family. "I love you guys," he said. It slipped out. He hadn't meant to say it. The words just came. The table went quiet, but not uncomfortable quiet, warm quiet. "We love you too, kid," Rebel said. And that was that. Simple. True. No one needed to say anything else. The court date came on a Tuesday in November. Malik had been dreading it for weeks. He knew what was coming. He'd have to see Dice again, have to sit in a room with him and tell a judge what had happened. Have to relive the worst parts of his life while strangers watched. But when the day arrived, he wasn't alone. Beatrice sat beside him, holding his hand. In the gallery behind them sat Rebel, Doc, Bulldog, Sarge, Snake, and a dozen other bikers. They'd taken time off work, ridden from all over the city, filled the courtroom with leather and denim and silent support. Dice was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. His hands were cuffed in front of him. He looked smaller than Malik remembered, thinner. The time in jail hadn't been kind. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Malik's stomach clenched. But then he felt Beatrice squeeze his hand, felt the presence of the bikers behind him, remembered what Rebel had said. You faced down your demons and won. He didn't look away. When it was time to testify, Malik walked to the front of the courtroom. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else, but they carried him anyway. The judge was a woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She leaned forward slightly as Malik took his seat. "Take your time, sweetheart. Just tell us what happened." Malik took a breath. Another. Then he started talking. He told them about the hitting, the yelling, the nights without dinner, the names, the threats. He told them about the night at the gas station, when Dice slapped him in front of 30 bikers. He told them about running, about the teddy bear, about being more scared of going home than of the strangers on motorcycles. His voice shook sometimes, cracked, but he kept going. And when the defense attorney tried to suggest that maybe Malik was exaggerating, maybe Dice had just been disciplining him, Malik looked the man straight in the eye. "He hurt me," Malik said. His voice was quiet but steady. "He hurt me almost every day for a year. I had bruises. I had scars. I had nightmares." He paused. "But I'm not scared anymore, because I know now that there are people who will believe me, people who will protect me, and I want him to know that too. I want him to know that he can't hurt kids and get away with it. Not anymore." The courtroom was silent. In the gallery, Doc wiped his eyes. The judge sentenced Dice to 8 years. Child abuse, assault, intimidation. By the time he got out, Malik would be 15, old enough to fight back, old enough to run, old enough to never be a victim again. Dice was led away without looking back. Malik watched him go, and for the first time in his life, he felt something he'd never expected to feel toward the man who had terrorized him. Nothing, just nothing. The monster was gone. And Malik was still here. That was enough. After the hearing, the judge signed another piece of paper. This one had been a long time coming. Permanent custody is hereby granted to Beatrice Walker for both minor children. Beatrice burst into tears. She'd been waiting 2 years for this moment. 2 years of phone calls and dead ends and sleepless nights. And now, finally, it was real. Malik and Keisha were hers, legally, permanently, forever. When they walked out of the courthouse, the bikers were waiting on the steps. 30 of them now, more than had been at the gas station that first night. Word had spread. Others had wanted to be part of the ending. They formed 2 lines, creating a path for Malik and his family to walk through. As the children passed, each biker reached out. A fist bump, a high five, a ruffle of hair, a whispered "proud of you." At the end of the line stood Rebel. He didn't say anything, just held out his hand. Malik shook it, man to man. "You did it, soldier." "We did it," Malik corrected. Rebel smiled. "Yeah, we did." 1 year to the day after that night at the gas station, Rebel showed up at Beatrice's house with something in his hand. It wasn't Friday. It wasn't a special occasion. The sky was gray and the air smelled like coming rain. But when Malik saw the motorcycle pull up to the curb, he ran outside before Beatrice could even ask where he was going. "Rebel!" The big man was already off his bike, helmet tucked under one arm. He looked the same as always, leather vest, faded jeans, that face that had scared Malik so badly the first time he saw it. But now Malik knew what lived behind those hard features: kindness, loyalty, love. "Hey, soldier." Rebel knelt down as Malik reached him. "Got something for you." He held out his hand. In his palm was a patch. It was old, faded. The edges were frayed, and the colors had dulled from years of sun and wind and road dust. But the words were still clear. "No child deserves to live in fear." Malik stared at it. His throat tightened. "This is yours," he whispered, "from your vest." "Was mine. Now it's yours." "But I'm not a biker." Rebel smiled, that rare smile that Malik had learned to treasure. "Kid, you don't have to ride a motorcycle to be part of this family. You don't have to wear leather or get tattoos or know how to fix an engine. This patch isn't about that. It's about what you believe, about who you are." He pressed the patch into Malik's hand. "You faced a monster. You stood up in a courtroom and told the truth. You showed more courage at 7 years old than most people show in a lifetime. As far as I'm concerned, you've earned this 10 times over." Malik's fingers closed around the worn fabric. It felt soft, warm, like it held years of promises inside its threads. "What do I do with it?" "Whatever you want. Put it on your backpack, hang it on your wall, keep it in your pocket. Just remember what it means. Remember that there are people out there fighting for kids like you, fighting to make sure no child has to live in fear." Malik looked up at Rebel, then at the house behind him, where Beatrice was watching through the window with tears streaming down her face. Then at Keisha, who had followed him outside and was now clinging to his leg, Rumble the bear clutched in her arms. He remembered something Doc had said that first night. The words had stuck with him, played in his head during hard moments, become a kind of prayer. "We're here for children who are in fear," Malik said quietly, "until they're not in fear anymore." Rebel's smile widened. "That's right, soldier. That's exactly right." Malik threw his arms around Rebel's neck. The big man held him tight, solid as stone, warm as sunlight. Behind them, Bulldog and Doc pulled up on their own bikes. They'd been riding together today. Hadn't wanted to miss this. Doc dismounted and walked over. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. Looks like someone got a present. Malik held up the patch without letting go of Rebel. Look, Doc. It says no child deserves to live in fear. I know what it says, buddy. I've got one just like it. Doc tapped his own vest, where an identical patch was sewn over his heart. Now you're officially one of us. Bulldog didn't say anything. He just walked over and joined the hug, wrapping his massive arms around both Malik and Rebel. After a second, Doc piled on too. 4 people, holding each other in the front yard of a little house on a quiet street, while the clouds parted overhead and a single beam of sunlight broke through. Keisha watched with wide eyes. Then she squeezed in between the legs of the adults and wrapped her tiny arms around whatever she could reach. Me too, she said firmly. I'm one of us too. Nobody argued. In the weeks that followed, Malik's story spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People talked. They couldn't help it. The tale was too remarkable to stay quiet. A 7-year-old boy beaten in a gas station parking lot. 30 bikers who refused to look away. A monster dragged off in handcuffs. A family reunited against all odds. The details grew and shifted with each telling, the way stories do. But the heart of it stayed true. And the heart was this: sometimes help comes from the places you least expect. Sometimes the scariest-looking people are the ones who will fight hardest to keep you safe. Neighbors who had never spoken to Beatrice before started stopping by, bringing casseroles, offering to help with yard work, asking if the kids needed anything. One man, an older gentleman, named Mr. Washington, who'd lived on the block for 30 years, told Malik he'd seen bikers his whole life and always assumed they were trouble. But now I know different, he said, shaking Malik's hand like he was greeting a grown man. Now I know they're heroes, and so are you, young man. Malik didn't feel like a hero. Heroes were strong. Heroes didn't have nightmares. Heroes didn't still flinch sometimes when someone raised their voice. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe heroes were just regular people who kept going even when they were scared. Maybe courage wasn't the absence of fear. Maybe it was doing the right thing anyway. That's what Rebel had taught him. What Doc and Bulldog and Sarge and all the others had shown him through their actions, not just their words. You don't stop being scared. You just stop letting fear make your choices. On a warm spring afternoon, Malik walked down the sidewalk with Rebel on one side and Bulldog on the other. They were heading to Lou's Diner, a spontaneous trip, no special occasion, just because it was a beautiful day and they felt like pizza. Malik was in the middle, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. The faded baka patch was sewn onto the front pocket now. Beatrice had done it herself, careful stitches holding the worn fabric in place. A neighbor's kid, a boy about Malik's age named Deshaun, stopped on his porch and stared. Malik understood. A year ago, he would have stared too. 2 massive men in leather, tattoos covering their arms, faces hard as concrete. They looked dangerous. They looked like trouble. But Deshaun wasn't seeing what Malik used to see. His eyes kept moving from the bikers to Malik, back to the bikers trying to make sense of it. "Hey," Malik called out, "you want to come? We're getting pizza." Deshaun's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Are they your friends?" Malik grinned. "They're my family." Bulldog raised a hand in greeting. His face was as stern as ever. But there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before Malik knew him. Or maybe it had always been there, just hidden behind the scars and the silence. Deshaun looked at his mom, who had appeared in the doorway. She studied the scene for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. "Be back by 5, she said. Deshaun's face lit up. He ran down the porch steps and fell into step beside Malik. "Do they have real motorcycles?" "The realest." "Can I ride one?" "Maybe, if you're good." "I'm always good." Rebel laughed. It was a deep sound, warm as summer thunder. "We'll see about that, kid. We'll see." They walked on, 4 figures in the spring sunshine. 2 men who looked like they belonged in a police lineup. 2 boys who'd just become friends. The world didn't make sense sometimes, but sometimes that was okay. That night, Malik lay in bed watching the ceiling fan spin. His room was quiet, safe. The sheets were soft, the mattress comfortable, the walls decorated with pictures he'd drawn and photos of his new life. Keisha's room was next door. He could hear her humming to herself as she drifted toward sleep, Rumble tucked under her arm. He held the back patch against his chest, traced the letters with his finger in the darkness. NOCHILDDESERVES. TOLIVEINFEAR. "No child deserves to live in fear," he whispered. The words felt different now than they had a year ago. Back then, they'd been a hope, a wish. A dream that felt too good to be true. Now they were a fact. He wasn't scared anymore. Not of Dice, who was locked away. Not of the dark, which was just the dark. Not of the future, which stretched ahead of him, full of possibilities instead of threats. He was safe. Really safe. Not the kind of safe where you have to be quiet and small and invisible. The kind of safe where you can laugh out loud and make mistakes and be a kid. The kind of safe everyone deserved. Malik closed his eyes. The patch rested over his heart, soft and warm. Outside, the street was quiet. No angry voices, no slamming doors, no sound of someone coming to hurt him. Just the wind, just the stars. Just peace. One child less was trembling in fear tonight, and that mattered. It mattered more than anything. Here's the truth about that night at the gas station. 30 bikers didn't have to stop. They didn't have to get involved. They could have finished their coffee, climbed back on their motorcycles, and ridden away into the darkness. Nobody would have blamed them. Nobody would have known. But they didn't do that. They saw a child in trouble, and they chose to help. They chose to stand between a monster and his victim. They chose to believe a 7-year-old boy when no one else would. They chose to fight for justice when the system had already failed. That's the thing about protection. It doesn't come from systems. Systems can fail. Systems do fail every single day in ways that break hearts and ruin lives. Protection comes from people. Regular people who decide that looking away isn't an option. Who decide that someone else's child is worth fighting for. The bikers of Baca understood that. They'd built their whole organization around it. But you don't need a motorcycle to protect a child. You don't need a leather vest or a patch or a nickname. You just need to pay attention, to speak up, to refuse to be a bystander when something wrong is happening. That's the legacy Malik carries now. Not just the patch on his backpack, not just the Friday pizza nights, not just the family he found in the most unexpected place. The legacy is this. He knows, deep in his bones, that good people exist. That help can come from anywhere. That no matter how dark things get, there's always someone willing to strike a match. Thank you for riding with us today. If you believe that sometimes the scariest looking people have the biggest hearts, subscribe to Biker's Bite and join our family. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done that night? Would you have stopped? Would you have gotten involved? And remember, the next time you hear a motorcycle rumbling down your street, don't assume the worst. It might be trouble, or it might be help on the way. Outside Malik's window, the night was quiet. The streetlights cast soft pools of gold on the sidewalk. A cat crossed the road without hurrying. Somewhere, a dog barked once and fell silent. The world was settling into sleep, peaceful and ordinary, the way it was supposed to be. In his bed, Malik dreamed of motorcycles. Not the scary kind. The kind that meant safety, family, home. He dreamed of riding down an endless highway with Rebel and Doc and Bulldog, the wind in his face, the sun on his back, nothing behind him but the past, and nothing ahead but possibility. He dreamed of his mother, too. She was smiling, she was proud. And in his dream, she said what he'd always needed to hear. "You're going to be okay, baby. You're going to be more than okay." He believed her. For the first time in his life, he believed it completely. The patch rested over his heart. The promise held fast. And in Malik's future, there would be more sunny days than dark nights. And in everyone, that promise of protection would ride shotgun.